Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, January 2nd. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Akron game is in 242 days. The game against Michigan in 333 days. We're going to be dropping this one a little earlier in the day than we typically do for these episodes, but that's because it's sort of a breaking news episode. A couple Ohio State wide receivers hit the transfer portal on New Year's Eve, so we're going to be talking about it today. We're going to be doing that with our buddy Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. Tony, I remember last spring coming up with a little mnemonic to remember how to spell Noah Rodgers' name and Bryson Rodgers' name because one of them had a D in their last name and one of them didn't. And here we are on the first day of the next year. Both of them were in their transfer portal. Neither of them had a catch as Buckeyes. This all feels a little anticlimactic.
Yeah, you can go ahead and put that mnemonic in the trash and let it go forever. Really disappointing turn for the 2023 receiver class after a disappointing turn for the 2022 receiving class. But kind of came in a flurry there. And when Bryson Rodgers was first, I kind of got the feeling that he wouldn't be the last from the class just based on how little they played. So disappointing turn. And we can talk about it more and more today, tomorrow, whenever, about how to keep this from happening. But it is a different day and age with NIL, and so much now of when you're sitting on the bench, you're costing yourself money. That is what people will tell you. So that is a brand new factor into all of this, even aside from playing time.
Well, and I mean, let's at least talk about the playing time moving forward because I think that's part of the conversation. And the 2024 season, Ohio State, let's assume that Emeka Egbuka comes back. That's not official yet, but it's certainly a possibility. If he does, you've got Emeka Egbuka, you got Carnell Tate, you got Brandon Inniss, you've got Jaden Ballard, who played some in the Cotton Bowl. You've got Jeremiah Smith coming in as a five-star, number one player in the class. You've got Mylan Graham coming in. You've another five-star. So that's six guys. You've got, Noah Rodgers, Bryson Rodgers. Maybe they're ahead of one or two of those guys, maybe at chart, but you're still kind of buried pretty deep on the depth chart. You're not looking at a ton of playing time. Bryson Rodgers is from Florida. Noah Rodgers is from North Carolina. We heard all through his Noah Rodgers recruitment that he was a homebody, and he seemed like he was leaning towards North Carolina State for long stretches because that's where he's from. And it would not be surprising to see that be where he ends up now. But it just felt like there was not a particularly clear path to the playing field for either of those guys this year. So, as you said, in this day and age of college football, if you don't have a clear path to the playing field in year two, you're seeing more and more guys jump after year one.
Yeah, and this is especially Bryson Rodgers doesn't surprise me greatly because he's playing the slot. He's playing the same position as Brandon Inniss. And with the assumption that Emeka Egbuka is back and he could be in the slot, where is that playing time coming for Bryson Rodgers, especially as much as they like to move guys around into the slot like they did with Marvin Harrison this year, like Carnell Tate will be done with and anybody else. So the playing time for Bryson Rodgers would be just tough to come by. Noah Rodgers, I think the receivers on the outside are very unproven outside of, and we'll see what Emeka Egbuka does. Will they move him outside if he comes back? Carnell Tate will be out there, obviously. Jeremiah Smith will be out there. I still think it's a ton to put on a freshman, and we can talk about him in a minute about how this puts so much more pressure on him to produce right away. But Noah Rodgers, knowing what we know, and certainly Brian Hartline knowing what he knows about his players. And again, it is the position coaches who play the players. They determine the playing time. Knowing what they know about Noah Rodgers, to not play him more, you are inviting him to leave. And you can say that about anybody. When you're not playing true freshmen, you're inviting them to leave. When you're playing walk-ons ahead of them, you're inviting them to leave. But to just assume that these guys were ready to play, I think is also not true. It's unfair. It's not accurate. But I don't know, Tom, is it the lack of blowouts this year that really impacted things? Because you go back and the number of snaps this year are probably down, just the total opportunities because of the blowouts and things like that weren't there. So maybe in 2022 they could have gotten these guys more snaps. And if you look at the 2022 receiver class, they got those guys more snaps than they got the 2023 class this year. So I think the offense overall probably cost them a receiver or two this year, just because it's not a rotation like we've seen in the past. And Brian Hartline's never really had a full rotation. But where are the snaps supposed to come from when you're playing in a bunch of closer games and you have a quarterback who is very reliant on Marvin Harrison? And even having Emeka Egbuka out for as long as he did, Carnell Tate and Xavier Johnson took most of those snaps. And really, there just wasn't anything for anybody else based on the way the games are going, and I guess based on the way Brian Hartline saw those freshmen.
Yeah, and looking forward now, it feels like, boy, they've got so many guys, and we're talking about how it's so hard to get these guys on the field because they have so many, it's such a deep room. You're losing Marvin Harrison. You're losing Xavier Johnson. You've lost Julian Fleming. And the 2022 class has already lost Caleb Burton and Caleb Brown to the transfer portal. You've now lost two guys from your 2023 recruiting class, Bryson Rodgers, Noah Rodgers. Kojo Antwi, Keon Grays. Keon Grays was hurt for most of the year. Kojo Antwi only saw the field a few times. It feels like if they do have other guys who end up leaving at some point, it's suddenly you're going from, boy, this room has a ton of guys, to, boy, there's not a whole lot of guys here because they just lost Jeremiah McClellan, who was a late flip to Oregon. So next year, if you've got the room, it's Emeka Egbuka, maybe, Carnell Tate, Brandon Innes, Jaden Ballard, Jeremiah Smith, Mylan Graham. We talked before the show, Demarion Witten. He's listed as a wide receiver. He's listed as a tight end. Might start as a wide receiver because he isn't quite physically developed enough to be a tight end just yet. That's not that many bodies in that room. You're looking at 7 guys there, and well, that's plenty. You have 1 or 2 guys get hurt, and all of a sudden, you have had Ohio State wide receivers miss big chunks of the last couple of years because of injury. That is a very talented, but suddenly not particularly deep room, which for someone who recruits as many talented players every single year as Brian Hartline, seems crazy that you could be having are they deep enough kind of conversation in that room.
Yeah, and if you're looking at receivers for next year, you may as well throw walk-on David Adolph in there as well, because he played more than Bryson Rodgers, more than Kojo Antwi, more than Keon Grays. So that might be somebody else. But we know Ohio State wanted to sign 4 receivers in this class, missed out on Jeremiah McClellan, missed out on a couple of other guys that they were trying to get. And so I do think that Demarion Witten maybe eases that pain a little. I think he was the MVP of the Army All-American Bowl last week playing receiver, which gives you an idea of his skill set. And we've seen him at Glenville the last 2 years playing everywhere. Plays quarterback, kicks, plays receiver, obviously. And every time we've seen him, he's been impossible to stop. He was the most impactful player I saw earlier this season when Glenville could do nothing in the first quarter and Witten wasn't playing. And then they finally let him play. I don't know what was going on there. Finally let him play, and then Glenville just took over and blew out the opponent just based on the presence of Demarion Witten in the plays he was making. But really, you're asking now for Jeremiah Smith, and I know everybody just assumes, well, he's a day one starter. He may be day one rotation. I think Emeka Egbuka, Carnell Tate, Brandon Innes, that looks great on the video game. That looks really cool. You got 3 5-star guys there, and another one waiting in the wings. But it's thin, and maybe maybe a thin room is the best way to keep anybody from transferring out, because there will be snaps for people. It's going to be interesting to see how they do it, and you're not in a position where you can continue to lose guys. And I don't know that the 2025 class will be nearly as good as the 2024 class, which wasn't. What is it as good as the 2023 class? The last 2 years, the 2023 class, the 2022 class, Brian Hartline signed 8 guys. He's already lost 4 to the portal in those 2 classes. And over the last 6 years, they've signed 21 receivers. 9 of them have gone into the portal. One was transferred to tight end in G. Scott. 10 of the 21 basically have played receiver at Ohio State or stayed at Ohio State. And that includes Keon Grays, Kojo Antwi, and Jaden Ballard, who we'll see what happens with them if because they've not been playing much either. And so they'll have decisions to make. The portal closes on January 2nd as we speak. So it'll be an interesting few days. And then the other portal window opens in the spring, after the spring. And maybe this will be an opportunity for guys to see where they stand in the spring, which we know always happens. I want to see where I am. Do I get passed over? If I do, deuces, I'm out. And at least Ohio State will know more then as well.
Yeah, and we'll probably know more about who might be throwing the football to all of those guys, as the Buckeyes are supposedly, maybe reportedly, close to adding a quarterback to the portal. We'll keep an eye on that for you. We'll see who's blocking for all of these guys. That's suddenly a little bit of a concern as well, in another room where they've brought in a lot of guys, and somehow they maybe are feeling like they're a little thin up front. Will they have any other additions to that group through the portal potentially now or after the spring? Just brought in a tight end through the transfer portal. Tony and I did an instant reaction show on that. You can find it youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. If you want to talk about any of this, you can do that on the Huddle board at BuckeyeHuddle.com. It is presented by our friends at Jeff Ruby Steakhouse and it is members only. So you want to sign up, you can do that at BuckeyeHuddle.com. You can, of course, also watch all of our stuff at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. If you're watching this there, hit that thumbs up. That will help other folks find these shows. Make sure you're subscribed, hit that bell, you get notified. We will probably do some live stuff here and there in the coming days as news continues to break around Ohio State transfer portal arrivals, departures, and everything else. So we will see you there at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle and at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.